and we'll ask you to unmute it as you have a role in the meeting. So first, we're going to be led in music by John Cameron. And John, if you just give me a second.
Okay, I will tell them what we're doing while you bring up the words.
Okay, go right ahead.
There are two days this month that mean a great deal to me. One of them will mean something to all of you. The second one maybe to some of you. The 25th is Robert Burns Day. For those of you unfortunate enough not to be Scottish, Robbie Burns. So this is not one of his songs, but we're going to begin by doing one verse of Loch Lomond. And then second, a song that everyone will know for, I would argue, perhaps for Americans, a more important day. Yesterday was Martin Luther King Day, and I invite those of you old enough to remember to join in that great protest civil rights song, We Shall Overcome. There are the words. All right, so let's begin with Burns. By yon bonny banks and by yon bonny braes, where the sun shines bright on Loch Lomond, where me and my true love were ever wont to gae, on the bonny, bonny banks o' Loch Lomond. Oh, ye'll take the high road and I'll take the low road, and I'll be in Scotland afore ye, but me and my true love will never meet again on the bonny, bonny banks o' Loch Lomond. We shall overcome, we shall overcome, we shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. We'll walk hand in hand, we'll walk hand in hand, we'll walk hand in hand someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. We shall live in peace, we shall live in peace, we shall live in peace someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. Back to you, Jim.
Thank you, John. I really appreciate it. And now let me just get the flag up here. Give me a second. Okay, does everyone see the flag?
Yes.
Okay, great. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now the four-way test of the things we think, say, or do. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? And will it be beneficial to all concerned?
And will it be fun?
Thank you very much. Will it be fun? Thank you, Bob. All right, and now our invocation from Joey Rothgary.
On this eve of the inauguration, we pray for our new president and vice president and for the well-being of all Americans. Prayers at presidential inaugurations were first delivered in 1937 during Franklin Roosevelt's second inauguration. These words are from prayers delivered at that ceremony. Almighty God, ruler of nations, we ask you to bless the people of the United States. Keep them at peace among themselves and in concord with all other peoples. Cause justice and charity to flourish among them, that they may all be enabled to live as persons created in your own image and likeness. Bless abundantly our chief magistrate. Inspire his leadership. Grant him delight and the strength to carry through the great work that confronts him and our country, and to pursue untiringly his vision of social justice and social peace. In your name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Joey. And now it's time for our visitation report. Joe Massey, unfortunately, is not feeling well. So I guess he's the first person up on our visitation report. He had just sent me a note earlier that he had come down with a bit of a cold and wasn't going to be able to join us today. I know we have a couple of guests here today. John, would you like to introduce your guests?
Yes, thank you. I actually have three guests. I'm not sure one of them is on yet, but I'll introduce all of them anyway. My first guest is Dr. Elsa Malona. Elsa is both a PhD and an MBA. She is Vice Provost for Faculty Affairs and Institutional Effectiveness at EVMS. My second guest is Dino Papadopoulou. Dino is a computer specialist, been working for many years. Right now, he works with a tech company that helps banks optimize mortgage lending practices. And I happen to know personally that both of them are gourmet cooks, and they both love to dance. So, and both of them are potential Rotary members. My third guest that I trust will be here before we get to the program is my son, Asa, who's a Mongolian archaeologist. And I want him here since I'm talking about that today, so that if you have any questions about archaeology, you can ask an expert and not me. So those are my guests.
Thank you, John. Our school of the week this week is Ocean View Elementary School, and today's scribe is Sally Hartman. So if you're speaking during the presentation, please speak clearly. Some of you have probably, in fact, all of you should have received over the weekend a couple of emails from district. One of them involved a new program that Rotary is rolling out called Rotary Works. One of the tenets of this program, and one of the reasons why it has come out, is that a fairly significant number of Rotarians have been affected by the economic turndown related to the COVID crisis, not only in the United States, but on a worldwide basis. So they have initiated a Rotary Works program, which involves some webinars, basically to brush up on job interviewing skills and basically what it's like out in the world of trying to get employed in today's COVID world. So if you haven't had a chance to take a look at that email, please do. One of the really nice things that I thought they made abundantly clear on it was that it's not just for Rotarians, it's for non-Rotarians. So if the services don't necessarily apply to you, but you know someone that they could apply to and someone who might benefit from them, feel free to pass it along. And there's even a section there where non-Rotarians, can register and use the services. So if you have any questions at all, you can either contact me or Sigger, our area governor, and we can help get some more information. I know that one of the things that we will be trying to do sometime over the next couple of months is get either the district coordinator or the area coordinator in for a call to give us a little bit more information on that program. Next is wanted to let you know that RILA is coming up. And Jeff, can you tell us a little bit more about RILA?
Yeah, I'm new to our district here, but in the past I've helped and run the RILA conference, but in my last district, it was 7 days long. RILA in our district stands for Rotary Youth Leadership Award. It deals with high school juniors and seniors. And in our district, it's just 2 days long. It'll be the 13th and 14th of February. And they'll be bringing speakers in, and they'll be bringing leaders in, and they're going to do this whole thing on Zoom. It's going to be interesting because they're going to start the conference with a larger Zoom room with rules for what is to take place over the next 2 days. And then they'll break out into smaller rooms with smaller groups. And for 2 days, they deal with communication, problem solving, strategic learning for leaders. And what we did in our district was we had a heavy dose about Rotary and the service organization and everything else that went into the leadership internationally of Rotary. In this district, I'm not quite sure because I'm just new to the committee. I'll find out what's going on, but I think we're going to send 2. We've done in the past 3 students, maybe one from Maury, one from Granby High School. The neat thing about this is in a short amount of time, kids from 63 different clubs in our district come together and they learn about each other, but they also learn about problem solving and how young adults can really be future leaders. So I'll know more about it and I'll keep you all posted.
And along those lines, if you know of any high school age students who would be interested in going, please let either myself or Jeff know, and we will we'll be sponsoring them and make that happen. So give us the problem of nominating too many kids.
Yeah, and they can be related to Rotarians. There's no restriction there. So if you have a nephew or a niece or a son or a daughter, even that fits that high school, junior, senior time frame, this is an outstanding. It's also really awesome for your college resume. I have to be honest with you. It really works very well. So kids use that. That's it.
Yeah, and it's one of the prime ways that Rotary on an international basis helps develop leadership in the next generation. So please take a look and see if you know any high school students who would benefit from that. And now, Sigger, we have another Paul Harris Fellow to bestow upon one of our members, don't we?
We absolutely do, and I'm delighted to recognize Bernie Cohen, who has been so very generous to the Rotary Foundation and has now gotten a Paul Harris Fellow +7 pin. He's well on his way to becoming a major donor. Congratulations, and thank you so much, Bernie.
Thank you, Bernie. Bernie, have anything you'd like to say? You have to unmute yourself first. Okay, you said it. Gotcha. Gotcha. All right, and now moving along to fines and happy bucks. For the visitors that we have today, fines and happy bucks are a way for our club to raise money for Norfolk Rotary Charities, which is the charitable arm of our club. And it's basically a way for members to tell us about good things going on in their lives. It's an opportunity for us to poke some fun at people who end up in the media for usually very good reasons. But again, all of the proceeds go to our Norfolk Rotary Charities, which enables us to support good works in the community. So anyone have any good news they'd like to share? Any happy bucks? Anyone's team win this weekend? Chuck Spence.
Happy to report that grandson Mason is home from his bone marrow transplant ordeal in Washington. He's still under care at CHKD, but he's making progress. So we're very thankful.
That's wonderful. That's great news. Lori Harrison.
I'll give happy bucks for the Bills. I'm a great Bills fan when they're winning. So I'm happy they're winning.
Okay, thank you. And anyone else with some happy bucks? I don't know. I'm not sure if Bill Gaw is raising his hand for happy bucks or what. You have to unmute, Bill. Bill, I saw your hand up and I wasn't sure if you wanted to let us know.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Every time anybody comes on to say something, I lose the picture. It's frustrating to me.
If you know what, if you go to the top right and click on the view button, it might be better for you if you kept it on gallery, so that you see all the pictures at the same time. Okay.
Okay.
It says view way up on the right-hand side of your screen. Do you see that?
Tell him you've got it.
I've got it.
Okay, and then click it so that it looks like there are a whole bunch of little squares instead of a big square and small squares.
Okay, you've got it. You've got
That's
it.
The gallery view.
That may do it. That's the gallery view, Bill.
okay.
Okay. Marty, thank you very much.
The old teacher can't help herself.
I was going to say, I know you were a teacher at one time. That's wonderful. That is wonderful. I'm going to give some happy bucks for Ann Baldwin's handstand in the pool. So I think that's pretty cool. And however, I have one stipulation. You have to add another goal now for the rest of the year.
I am 86, so I count that.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Anyone else have anything they'd like to share with the club? All right. Well, thank you. I will tell you that our Sergeant at Arms today is Sharon Laderberg, and our Vice President in charge of programs is Lori Harrison. And without further ado, Lori, you have the floor.
Thank you. Our Rotaractorian of the day is Bob Healy, and he'll be introducing your speaker. Bob has been a member of the Rotary Club of Norfolk for 44 years. His favorite part, I'm sure you aren't surprised to hear that he enjoys sharing our vocations with high school students in Norfolk and thinks that's one of the best things we do for our community. And as we all know, Bob is a musician and he likes playing Jimmy Buffett for audiences in the area, young and old. So Bob, take it away and introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Lori. Our speaker today, can everyone hear me? Good. Okay, I want to make sure. Is John Cameron. And John Cameron joined the Rotary Club several years ago and enjoys it tremendously. And as we saw today, he is an active member of the music committee. John is a professor of history at Old Dominion University, his BS from Davidson and his PhD at Chapel Hill. John specializes in French history, especially the Revolution. He has a book coming out this year on the lives of the men of the 30th North Carolina Infantry during the Civil War. He writes many novels as well, none of which have been published. He said you can deduce what you want from that. He's married to Abby and has two wonderful sons, one of which hopefully is on our broadcast today. Today, John will share with us his trip to Mongolia and his experience at the Nadam, which is the Festival of Manly Arts in a Gobi village. I can't wait to hear this. I give you John Cameron.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you. I had a note from from my son Asa, who says he's having he's having computer internet problems, but we'll hope that he will be on by the time we finish, in case you've got questions. President Jim has agreed to handle the slides for me, since I am a bit technologically challenged. So if you want to go ahead and start that slideshow. So Mongolia, the Gobi Desert, and Nadam. I always wanted to go to Mongolia. I always wanted to see the Gobi. I think since I was in elementary school, it just seemed like a fascinating place to me, and a cold desert, though I assure you it's not cold in the summertime. It's only cold in the winter. So I got a chance in the summer of 2019 to visit my son Asa's dig in the northern Gobi Desert. And my older son, who was unable to be with us today because of his work, was able to go with me. So Abby trusted the two of us to go. So what I'm going to do is give you a little bit about Mongolia and the northern Gobi, and then talk about this fascinating festival that went on. Here is the monument to Genghis Khan. It's several hours outside of Ulaanbaatar. The capital is Ulaanbaatar. It's exactly 12 time zones away from us, so it's precisely on the other side of the world. And of course, half the things in Mongolia are named for Genghis Khan, as you can imagine. You can take the elevator up into the horse's belly, and then walk upstairs. If you look carefully on top of the horse's head, you'll see a few people standing up there, and that will give you an idea of the size of this thing. We landed in Ulaanbaatar, which is the only place you can get to in Mongolia. You can get there from about 5 other cities in the world. There are no direct flights from the United States. We went by way of Tokyo and then took Air Mongolia into Ulaanbaatar. I highly recommend Air Mongolia if you ever go. It's a little Spartan, but they're delightful people, and they're perfectly honest. You don't ever worry about them stealing anything. So unlike going by way of Moscow, which I don't recommend from what I've heard. Well, we spent a little time in the capital, and then we took off 8 hours south. So Jim, give me a slide. 8 hours south, the paved road disappeared, and this is the road that we took off on. This is going across the northern Gobi. It's actually, this part of the Gobi is more properly speaking, the Gobi steppe. So there's enough moisture here to support fairly large herds of animals who move about. And the animals are renowned, fast horses, very tasty food, because the animals, the sheep and the goats and the cattle, the horses, eat mostly wild chives, which is what grows here. So this flavors the meat. So I've got a couple of slides just to show you other parts of the Gobi, and then we'll talk archaeology. So change it, Jim. The further south you go, the drier it gets, as you can see. But there are enormous dry lake beds. There are, give us another slide. Here's a dry riverbed, but you can see there's enough moisture underground that you still have these stunted plants and trees growing in it. And many of the archaeological sites are on high banks overlooking what was a river several thousand years ago, as you can imagine. In the middle of the northern Gobi, there are 2 large outcroppings of rocks. So slide. Here's one of them. This archway, the Mongolians are very proud of. I mean, if you go to the southwest of the United States, of course, you see dozens of these things, massive things. Well, the geology is very different in the Gobi. This is the only one in the entire desert. And from the looks of it, what is here on the right side, when we got to it, I'm not so sure it's going to last much longer. It's barely balanced on that right-hand piece. If you go down further, really into the middle of what looks to me like it was a massive volcano or a caldera, maybe even 1,000,000 years ago, so slide, you find some fascinating rocks. These are hexagons that poke up out of the ground in one place. I'm told there's a very similar outcropping off the coast of Ireland someplace, which I've never seen. So slide, I have one more of this. This is what they look like up close. It appears to have been the very center of this massive volcano. And I assume the heat and the geological forces produced it. There are several things that'll strike you very quickly when you get to Mongolia. First of all, there are no stock laws. You have to go back before the 1920s, and certainly in the eastern United States, with no stock laws. So animals simply roam. They're either branded or their ears are tagged. There are no fences whatsoever. There were herds of animals right on the outskirts of Ulaanbaatar. So the next few, if you just want to go about 3 slides slowly through, Jim, here's a herd of camels right on just off the edge of the Gobi. You can see it's a little greener. These are domesticated. Here are some horses right outside of a well. That thing you see to the left is a well. They're waiting for somebody to come give them some water. Here's a small herd of goats wandering through very close to where the archaeology dig was. Then one more. Here's the shepherd of a very large herd who came through. And just to show you how delightful and trusting these people are, we were on our way back to the capital and we had just left the desert. And this massive herd crossed over. And literally there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of sheep and goats. The Gobi, by the way, produces probably the best cashmere in the world. So if you go there, make sure you take plenty of room on your charge card to buy cashmere when you get into the capital. Our driver, who was a friend of one of the archaeologists, it's the only way to get around in Mongolia is to hire a driver in a private car. And he was also, in his day job, we would say, a regional manager for Coca-Cola. But he said, "Oh, anybody want to ride the horse?" I didn't, but I thought it sounded like a good idea. He got out of the car, and when the shepherd came across the highway, which you see just to the left, all the cars have to stop while the sheep came across. He went over and he flagged the guy down and he asked him if he'd let us all ride his horse. To my astonishment, the shepherd got off the horse and said in Mongolian, "Well, of course, anybody who wants to ride, hop on, take a ride." I did not do so. But our driver did, and he rode up and down. Every Mongolian, male and female, can ride, and most of them can butcher a sheep. So it's they're not that far removed from the steppes. All right, let's talk some archaeology just briefly. The ecology of the Gobi is very interesting because it's so dry, not much happens. This, believe it or not, is the top of the ground, and underneath it, there's an Iron Age grave, possibly 3,000 years old. This is the sort of stuff my son was excavating. And when you find the right places, you simply see this on top of the ground. And there it is. Bronze Age graves look slightly different, but this is an Iron Age. So give us another slide. This was another archaeologist in the area, and what he had here was a Neolithic hearth on top of a Paleolithic hearth, which really pushes it back perhaps even 6,000 or 8,000 years. Pretty astonishing, and he's just down the road from others. So slide. Here's a Bronze Age grave. My son's colleague excavates Bronze Age. They're very shallow. They were just starting on this one. He had been very discouraged. He had finished one and found nothing except for one bronze arrowhead. Of course, grave robbers have gotten to these things sometimes 2,000 years ago, and he found nothing in it. So he's starting a new one. but the grave is only 4 or 5 feet deep. Now, Iron Age graves, on the other hand, so give us the next slide. Iron Age graves can be 15, 16 feet deep. This is looking down into the one my son had excavated last summer. They were just opening it up again for the day. You see the shape of the stone coffin, if you will, right in the bottom. The head, I believe, was to your right. The left area that's broader was filled with animal bones. So obviously animals who had been slaughtered and put in for the spirits to consume after death. The next 2 or 3 slides, if you'll just sort of go through them slowly, Jim, this will show you the depth and what's happening. The 2 rocks that you see on the left were actually covers on top of the coffin. And here's my son and one of his colleagues down inside the grave, just to show you the depth. This, pause on this one a second, Jim. If you ever wondered what 3,000-year-old fabric might look like, that's been in the bottom of a grave for that long, this is it. They were incredibly excited that they had found this fabric. And if you look carefully towards the top, you can see the weave of the cloth. It's very rare for something like that to survive. Okay, now let's talk about Nadam. Give us one more slide. This is what it looks like as you approach a village in the Gobi. Now, we were lucky enough, the second week of July, every year is the Nadam festival. It's the most important time in Mongolia. Every man except the very old and the very young or the sick wrestles. Many of them ride horses. They have a celebration that lasts up to 10 days. No one does anything except celebrate the Nadam festival. So we were lucky enough to be able to go to observe this festival in a small village. So the next 2 slides, you want to hit them one at a time. Here are the local gear. We tend to call them yurts here, but the Mongolians call them gear. The one you see in the center, the side is rolled up for ventilation in order to get a little air in there. So give us, and this is a closer up. Now, the thing that you observe first when you get into this village is that there are horses everywhere. Mongolian horses are small horses. They're not much bigger than Welsh ponies. And the last slide I'm going to show you way at the end is on the side. Here's a whole bunch of people on horses just mingling around in the midst of the crowd. From the time somebody is probably 3 years old, they're on horseback. They still are, even to this day. So you mingle here with food booths that are serving what look like big fat pancakes with coleslaw on top of them. Other booths with water and some games of chance. You throw a dart at a balloon, you throw a ring around a stick, the sort of things you find at county fairs here. Everything is homemade. And your first thought is that these are incredibly poor people. But you need to stop and think for a minute. That's looking at them from our perspective. They're not poor by their perspective, because what makes up wealth for these people is the size of your herds. Do you have a large herd of sheep? Do you have horses? Do you have camels? Above all, do you have horses? And they consider themselves to be the most fortunate of people and really looked at us sort of with condescending pity, because we were there with no horses and we simply had to admire theirs. This is one of my favorite pictures. Here you have 6 children, obviously not very old, and they're surrounding this young girl who is really making, I think, a bit of a fashion statement. She's got this lovely shirt that exposes the shoulder, and she was quite obviously the leader of this group. I mean, arrogantly so, as she looked around among her supporters. Very friendly, very, very good people. Now, the Nadam festival itself. We'll stick with this slide for a second. There are three manly arts. Archery is one. The second is horseback riding, and the third is wrestling. It came as a big surprise to us to see that the village champion of this manly art was actually a young woman. And here she is in her short skirt with her daughter behind her, watching her nock an arrow and getting prepared. Notice the shape of the arrow. This is the same composite bow, the shape of the bow. It's the same composite bow that Genghis Khan's warriors used as they conquered most of the world. It's a small bow, very powerful, very strong. You can fire it from horseback. It's also the same bow, maybe not made from the same material, but the same shape that Penelope's suitors were unable to string when Odysseus finally returns from his travels. And of course, he's the only one who can string it. And I assure you, I tried to string one of these and I did not succeed. She had bows, she has arrows, and she invited all of us to take a turn. Fire away. I did not do very well, I have to admit. Some of the others in our group did much better. The targets were set out 30, 40, 50 yards away. They were tin cans, and I didn't even get close, but some of the others did. Now, the second of the manly arts is horse racing. And again, I was fascinated to see that the horse race for Nadam is by children. It's not men. And girls also participate. In fact, let me add a verbal footnote here. One of the things that struck me that I had not expected, since I had never been to Mongolia, knew little about it, was that women are not at all walking behind their men. I mean, we have this image of Asian women, especially from movies of Japan and Korea, that the woman walks 10 yards behind and she's always bows her head. Not so in Mongolia. Women run businesses, they control a great many things, and they race in these races. These were the winners. These were the first ones. They start 20 kilometers out in the desert and they race back into the village. A few of them you'll see have on riding helmets. Most of them did not as they came. These were the first ones, and the horses were still moving at a good clip. 10 minutes later, they were still coming in, and some of the horses could just about pick up one foot and put it in front of the other. And the adults had to go out and pull on the reins to get them across the finish line. But here is the horse racing. Now, the manly art that is the most important, absolutely, is wrestling. So let's stop here for a minute. Mongolian wrestling, like much country wrestling, if you will put it, is a very simple affair. It's the first one who touches the ground with anything except a hand or a foot loses. It's very much the same wrestling that goes on in the Highlands of Scotland. We can be back to Bobby Burns for a minute. Every Asian country has it all the way across. They have national championships. The Mongolians are fanatics when it comes to wrestling. There are 8 levels. They start off at the villages like this, and they'll end up a week later in Ulaanbaatar, in the capital, for the national championship. And we were fortunate enough to be back in the capital and be able to see the national champion. Now, let me tell you what you're seeing here. On the left, the flag is a shrine. Now, in the capital, the shrine, and I'll show you a picture of that in a bit, looks more like what Genghis Khan might have had: horse tails, feathers, something that a shaman would approve of, very tribal. Here, the flag represents all of that. And what these young men are doing, they are imitating the flight of a mythical bird, a very large Mongolian bird, similar to the roc. if you remember your Arabian Nights tales. When a wrestler comes into the rink, he comes in and he runs always to the left. He runs around the shrine, waving his arms as if he were flying like this mythical rock. Then he comes back in and he waits his turn for his wrestling match. There are no weight classes. There are no second chances. It's one fall, you're done. And needless to say, the winners tend to be large men, especially those who are quick and have good moves. One more thing I can show you. On the right, you see two men already engaged in wrestling, and around them there's a cord, and the typical hold is you face each other. One hand goes up to that rope. The other can even hold on to a belt. I mean, there really aren't any rules. You can hold on to anything you can grab, and then you try to throw them down. Give us the next slide, and I'll give you a little more description. Now, here is the beginning. Couple of things to note here. You see three officials watching these two men. They're wearing very traditional clothing. Most Mongolians now don't. They dress in Western style clothing, but the shepherd we found was dressed this way. And of course, for Nadam, all of the officials. You'll see that the one on the left, the one in blue, are both holding hats. When a wrestler comes into a match, he always has a hat on. And many of them have very Western straw hats. You can see that's what they're holding, despite the fact that the two officials in red are wearing more traditional Mongolian hats. Before you wrestle, though, you turn your hat over to an official because the hat is in close contact with the head. And that's where the good spirits reside, and the thought and the passion. And it would not do for something that has been in contact with the head to touch the ground. Therefore, you give the hat to an official and he holds it until it's over. The winner of the match will circle around the loser under his arm. The loser will show his respect by slapping the guy on his rear end as he goes underneath. And then the winner puts his hat back on and he's ready for the next round. One thing about the costume that they wear, and this is a great example here. Here's the end of a match. The man in red has just tossed his opponent to the ground. And standing to the right, you see a wrestler waiting his turn. A very manly pose he's struck here for the manly art of wrestling. Now, the story goes, and I'm not sure if I believe it, but everybody repeats it, so I'll repeat it to you, that they dress this way because a few years back, a woman sneaked into the ranks and succeeded in winning quite a few matches before someone discovered that she was in fact a woman. So from that point on, wrestlers must wrestle bare-chested. They will take no more chances on a woman slipping in and winning. So wrestling. Now, after we witnessed, the wrestling went on all day. We were not going to stay all day. We went over to the gear that you saw earlier. And inside these were local officials. In one of them, there were village officials. The name of the village is, in translation, is Golden Table. And in the second gear, we found regional officials for the North Gobi region. The regional gear was much more opulent. So you go in, again, you always move to the left, never to the right. You go into the left and you sit, and you're invited to partake of meat or cheese or pickles. I suspect they picked up the pickles from the many decades of being under Soviet influence. But there's cheese, there's meat. The meat is done up in a proper Mongolian barbecue, and I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. Various slices of sausages and a drink. So give us the next slide. Here is Attic. Attic, this white stuff is fermented mare's milk. It is the official national drink of Mongolia. The real national drink is vodka, but this is the official national drink. So we sat around tables as honored guests who were there, and we were offered a bowl of arak. There were very large bowls, and they dipped us out. It had to be a couple of cups in a bowl, presented it to each one of us. I managed to get enough down not to insult our host. It is the sourest substance I have ever imagined in my life. It makes lime juice and lemon juice taste sweet. I mean, it is astonishingly sour. It's not vile. It's not what you might expect, but it is just sour. We were honored by being here with, you'll give us the next slide, a local official who sat at the end of the table, his coat covered with medals. My guess is these could even have been medals, if not from World War II. Certainly they were given, I suspect, by the Soviets or the Mongolian puppet government when the Soviets controlled things. And he welcomed us very solemnly. I held up my camera at one point and indicated I'd like to take his picture, and he nodded yes, and he straightened up and he put a bit of a smile on his face, and here's the result. He has his own bowl of arak sitting in front of him that he occasionally would sip on. And at that point, after we had all tasted our arak and not insulted them, he asked the women in the gear to prepare shots of vodka for everyone. So shots of vodka were passed around and we downed them. And at least it took away the taste of the arak. We then left and went back to the campsite. Now here is the preparation of a true Mongolian barbecue. The hand you see to the right was the cook for the archaeological camp. And here's what you do. You heat rocks until they're red hot. And the only fuel is, of course, dried dung out here in the desert. There's no wood, there's no anything else. So you gather up enough dried dung, and they set it on fire with blowtorches and put these big rocks in, and small rocks. And when the rocks are red hot, you put them very carefully, you can see he's got tongs doing it, down inside of big pans that are filled usually with meat, but in some concession to Americans, they put some vegetables in here too. If you happen to be vegetarian and you go to Mongolia, you'll have trouble outside of the capital. You'll have great trouble. Mongolians only eat meat, and they don't put any seasoning on it. Occasionally a little salt, but basically it's just barbecued meat. If you're vegan, either you'll compromise or you'll starve to death. You simply won't function. So you do this, and then you put put a top on it, and you put it back inside. You see the top being held up to the left by the man in the red shirt, who actually was a Mongolian. This is the man who was doing the Neolithic site. Put the top on, you put it back in under the coals to keep it good and hot. And then, if you give us one more slide, you open it up, and several hours later, you take the meat out and the bones out, and you gnaw on them and you eat the vegetables. The rocks will still be very warm, and it's considered to be very good luck to take one of the rocks and rub it between your hands and move it around. The man in the white shirt who's reaching for something was our driver. So he's here. One next slide. This is just to show you what Naadam looked like in the capital. It's in the big soccer stadium. Here is the, oh good, I see Asa just got here. Here's the shrine. You can see the horses' tails and the tribal insignia, and they're changing the guard. Now, the goose step almost certainly was picked up from the Soviets. We associate this with Germany, but in fact, the Russians have always goose stepped. And I suspect that the Mongolians picked it up from the Russians. So the new ones are standing at attention. There always are 4 guards around this shrine. And the last night after the championship match, they came out on horseback and they took the standards and they put them on with their horses, and they left to put them back into safekeeping. One more slide, and then we'll stop. One of me. This is just to show you the size of the horses. They're very, very small. And back of me, you see the herd of sheep and goats that our shepherd had been getting across the road. As I said, I did not get on the horse, nor did I wrestle. If I'd been 10 years younger, I would have at least wrestled, but not now, not now. So I think that's it, Jim. I see Asa is on. I'm here. Does anybody have questions?
Anyone have any?
I have a question.
Sure, go ahead, Ann.
The village that you visited for the tournament, it's so arid. Obviously, they eat a lot of meat because they can't grow anything, right?
True.
Or what do they do? Do they grow root vegetables or what?
Asa, you would know more about that than me. Unmute yourself and.
No. So, there is like gathering. So chives are a really big thing in the Gobi. That's kind of one of the few sort of green things you'll find people selling often. But I mean, because I mean it's a modern country, and
It looks
the village,
somewhat remote.
yeah, I mean the village is technically accessible by bus. There actually is technically a bus you can take randomly. So, but I mean, they have like canned food, that kind of stuff. And if you go into the little local markets, there'll be 1 or 2 kind of measly potatoes and carrots. But so nutrition wise, you can technically get all of the vitamins and minerals you want from eating organs.
Oh, okay.
So that's a big component too. There's a lot of organ consumption, especially out in the countryside.
I see.
Yeah.
Did you all stay in the village, or where did you all spend your nights? What kind of accommodations?
Now, I mean, Asa could certainly talk to it, but I just jumped into their campsite, and they had a combination of big tents and small tents and 3 gear, I guess. Most of the Mongolians actually stayed in the gear, but the Americans were all in tents.
Yeah, so usually we'll go and we'll rent gears from local families. So we'll have a kitchen gear. There'll be a gear for basically the cook and the drivers. So the other there's Utsarin, who's the 3rd director of our project, who is a professor in Mongolia and works on Neolithic stuff. But the other director is actually another graduate student with me at Yale. So our cook is actually his uncle. And then our other drivers, one are basically high school buddies of his. So the drivers and the cooks kind of get their own gear. And then we work with we basically hire a bunch of university students, like freshmen and sophomores. So they have the option to bring a tent if they wanted to. But they all end up kind of just sleeping all in the same gear, like 12 people to a gear. It's kind of like a borderline summer camp for them. And I don't know if you get a bunch of 18-year-old kids basically in one big bunk, essentially. And then everyone else, we usually, like foreign researchers, usually just bring our own tents. So just camping.
Hey, Asa, I may have missed this, but who do you work for and what is your mission?
Oh, okay. So I'm a PhD student at Yale. So I work for myself. So my friend and the co-director of our project's name is Buhu, or Buk Chulong. So he's also a graduate student at Yale. And he still unofficially works for the basically Mongolian Academy of Sciences. So the Institute of Archaeology at the Mongolian Academy of Sciences is like the administrative body for all archaeology in Mongolia. They issue the permits, they house the collections. So, and then Utsarin, who's the third director, also works for the Institute of Archaeology and the National Teaching University of Mongolia. So the three of us are running our project, and we kind of each have a little different component. So Utsarin does Neolithic stuff, so 5,000 BC to about 3,000 BC. Buhu does the Bronze Age stuff, which is like 3,000 to say 400 BC, and then I work on the next period. So we each kind of have our own little component, and we work on different, we work at different archaeology sites. It's just that there's about 400 archaeology sites within the region we work in, and we have a permit to basically do any research we want within about 25 square kilometers. So
Chip Vogan has a question.
Hi, Asa and John. I got in just a few minutes late. I'm sitting over in the courthouse, but I'm so glad I was able to get in. What were your sources of water? How did you get just your daily intake of water?
So in the Gobi, you got to get it from wells usually. So in basically the socialist era of Mongolia, there were a lot of works programs. And one of the works programs they did was they went around the country and they dug a ton of wells. So all the livestock feed at the wells or drink at the wells. And those are also the same wells that you get your water from. So there's certain wells that are potable and there's certain wells that aren't potable. So there's the big well we got all of our water from is the Sagandel well, or the White Robe well. That's just the name of the well. So every couple of days the students would essentially drive the van that we had down to the well and fill up a bunch of these like giant barrels with water. And that was the drinking water, the bathing water, the clothes washing water, artifact washing water, basically everything. There's no other source of water. And this was, if you're deeper in the Gobi, it would be, you might have to drive into a village to get water. There's probably, a lot of times villages have wells. They're built closer to where there's decent water.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Anne had a hand up.
Anne.
Go you.
Ann Baldwin, did you have another question?
How about that? You hear me now?
Yes.
Typical question. I'm curious about how long you stay at a dig, and also whatever you find, does it belong to the Mongolian institution or government?
Yeah, so I mean the project length is just, I guess, dictated by your research goals. For us, it's usually our field seasons have been about 45 days. You can't really work in Mongolia outside unless you're Mongolian, essentially. Between basically like mid-May to mid-September is the only time of year you can work outside. Otherwise, it's too cold. The winters are about -30, -40. So you don't want to be outside working. You couldn't dig even if you wanted to. So you have a kind of a short time frame in the summer to really do research. So all of the geological, biological, archaeological research is done in the summer.
Oh, okay.
And for the collections, yeah, so everything, you can't run a project in Mongolia unless you have a Mongolian counterpart, essentially, if you're a foreign researcher. So everything that we excavate gets taken to the institute and they catalog it and essentially house it. And then we can, because Utsarin and Buhu work for the institute, it's not a huge deal for us to sample stuff or to request export permits to take things out of the country for scientific analysis. But we still have to do that. We have to get permission from the government to, give them very specific information about what we're taking out, why we're taking out, and what we're going to do with it. The one weird quirk with that is that it's actually easier to take things out of the, archaeologically, it's easier to take things out of the country if you're going to destroy the material. So if you're doing something like radiocarbon dating, which is a destructive analysis, that's actually getting the permits easier than if you wanted to take out, a nice ceramic vessel that you were gonna, I don't know, do some weird project on where you're sampling the inside for residues and you wanted to actually return the pot. That permit's actually harder to get for some reason, which makes no sense to me whatsoever because it's non-destructive. That should be, that should be kind of the thing that you'd want if you were doing conservation. But
where are you right now, Asa?
I'm in New Haven, so I'm at
I was
Yale.
gonna say that does not look like a tent. Okay.
No, I do have my Mongolian shaped country clock that
there you go.
Umba, the Boohoo's uncle, our cook, gave me last year. So, but no, I haven't been able to go. We weren't able to go this summer at all, and it's not looking great for this coming summer either. Getting into the country, so yeah, kind of in a holding pattern.
Chip Vogan has another question. You have to unmute, Chip. Chip, you have to unmute your phone. We can't hear
I
you.
just figured that out. Thank you.
Okay, all right.
So if it's that cold, the majority of the year, Asa, what source do you use to stay warm?
So
they use. You're not there.
Oh, yeah. Well, so Dell is the name of the traditional robe you'll see people wearing, but there's winter dells essentially. So there's really thick dells, and then stoves. So if you go into any actual family gear, like out in the countryside, they basically have the equivalent of a wood burning stove, but it'll be dung burning stove that'll just be in the middle of the gear. But also, I think these gears are probably date back to 300 BC. That's the first evidence we have of sort of mobile domiciles in Mongolia. So people have been using these types of sort of houses for a really long time. So they are incredibly well designed.
Yeah, they're made mostly of felt, aren't they? Asa?
Yeah, so you have sort of a wooden lattice on the inside that's then covered with, completely covered with felt. And then there's, I don't know, layers of cloth on the outside too. And then usually the inside is really nice and well decorated. So in the summers, you can kind of fold the bottoms of the flaps up and you get a nice cross breeze. And in the winters, you can actually dig and push the dirt around the outside, and it's not airtight, but it'll be really, really warm. And you can actually open and close different flaps on the top and sort of really control how much heat and breeze you're getting. So, I mean, that's a big part of it. And they're not, I mean, it's not quite an igloo, but two, it's if you go into a ger, in a family ger, there'll be 1 to 2 beds, and you're talking about a family that might have up to 10 kids. So there's a lot of very close sleeping too, which probably helps. But I mean, in the summer, that's not so much of an issue for us, just because we're in the desert steppe. But I've worked all over the country, and it can snow in the summer. So when I work in the north, which is basically Siberia, you just have to bring winter clothes with you, because randomly one day it'll be 40 or below freezing just in the middle of the summer. So you kind of just have to prepare for that.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Okay, Ann, we got time for one more. Go ahead.
Have over Mongolia an influence?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
How much control does the Soviet Union have over Mongolia? Or are they independent?
Oh, currently? So Mongolia was actually never part of the Soviet Union.
Okay.
It's the second oldest communist socialist country. So they became that sort of before the Soviet Union really started consolidating stuff. And that's one of the reasons it just wasn't incorporated in, because it already existed sort of as a puppet state. So they didn't really need to. And the other reason is essentially this is the same sort of foreign policy that's in place now. China and Russia don't want to share a border. So they have sort of left Mongolia there as a buffer zone. And that's still to this day how it functions. So most of the politicians are basically in Putin's pocket. The current president is a former like silver medalist in judo in the Olympics. He's this big kind of bulking wrestler guy. But his wife is Russian, and he kind of does a lot of things that work to the benefit of Russia, and to the not complete disbenefit of China, because they can't piss off China too much. But a lot of the foreign policy is sort of aimed at the fact that they don't like China. So one of the really bizarre things that Mongolia did in the last year is they had a fake meat shortage scandal. So the government decided this was good sort of political theater, and they went to these meat packing places that had a bunch of frozen meat, and they brought cameras, and they were showing people how the scandal that the Chinese were like stockpiling frozen sheep at these locations, and that the Chinese were trying to sort of corner the sheep market in Mongolia. But of course, if you go to a meat packing place that's supposed to be full of meat, it will be full of meat. It made no sense whatsoever. So there's they kind of have to play both sides while not being too overly, one way or the other, because it has to remain as this buffer zone.
I see. Thank you.
Well, John and Asa, thank you very much for this informative view of inside of Mongolia. We really appreciate it and learned a lot. One of the things that we do as our club is very committed to literacy is that we place a book in your honor in our School of the Week. So a book will be donated in your honor and will be put in the library at Ocean View Elementary School. So thank you very much, and we appreciate a wonderful presentation. One thing that I did just want to pass along, a little bit of bad news. Ann Morgan, who's our bookkeeper for our club, her mom passed away on this past Friday down in North Carolina. So please keep her in your thoughts and prayers. And if you want to reach out to her, feel free, but did want to let you know that Ann, a valuable member of our team, has suffered that loss. So our next meeting will be February 2nd. We're not meeting next week. We'll be meeting on February 2nd, and our speakers will be Randy Wright and Dr. Patricia Turner. So thank you for attending. Thank you for the guests who were here, and thanks for all you do as Rotarians, and look forward to seeing you all in a couple of weeks. We are adjourned.